3/4 of a billion years ago, our planet was locked in an icy embrace, now known as Snowball Earth.
Well, there's disagreement among experts as to the extent of the glaciation, but there's no disputing that it was darn cold.
Cold indeed. However, beneath its solid surface, in the lightless, icy depths, there was life. In a narrow band at the equator, a remnant of photosynthetic life managed a spare existence. However, the majority of Earth's life lived beneath the ice and derived its energies from the planet's molten core.
At the time, life had been around for close to 3 billion years, and in that time it had done quite a lot. Photosynthesis, lots of nifty molecular machines and such, probably a lot that we're as yet unaware of. But to us, if we could see it at all, it would have all just looked like a lot of blobs.
But the deep freeze was not to last indefinitely, and when at last the thaw came, it brought with it the dawn of a new era in the history of life. First to appear were fronds and spindles, whose strange fractal growth pattern shows them to be unrelated to later life forms. These mysterious organisms, known as the rangeomorphs, were soon followed by others, and in the geological blink of an eye, the once featureless abyssal plain had become a garden of wondrous forms. Based on the names of important fossil formations, this proliferation of life is known as the Avalon Explosion, and the educational accessory that was spawned by this age is known as the Ediacaran Biota Keychain. Back in the fall of 2016, sculptor Chris Taylor had just introduced two of his most successful scientific keychains, based on the well-known fossil formations of the Solnhofen limestone and the Burgess shale. Both pieces had been well received in the scientific crafts community, and sensing that the time was right, he began to contemplate a follow-up. However, the previous two pieces had both included fossils which were famous cultural icons, and there was no obvious successor.
Well, due to customer suggestions, the Ediacaran biota were on my radar at the time, but I had never seriously considered them as a subject. It's not just that they're less well known. I mean, regardless of their scientific significance, critters from the Ediacaran just aren't as relatable as those from the Cambrian.
Sessile fronds have rarely captured the public attention. However, the Ediacaran period had something going for it that other geologic eras did not. In contrast to later times, the conditions that allowed for exceptional fossil preservation in the Ediacaran were a worldwide phenomenon.
Well, by the later standards, of course, there's not a huge diversity of form. But if you don't limit yourself to one site, then there's good material for a keychain that tells a compelling story.
Having the ambitious goal of representing the entirety of the Ediacaran biota, Chris began his research. One fact that drew his attention was that paleontologists characterized these organisms broadly into three groups, known as assemblages.
It may have something to do with my own lack of scientific credentials, But whatever the reason, I'm always particularly gratified when I can include some sort of cutting edge or obscure scientific detail in my work. And this business with the 3 assemblages fit the bill, but there was a problem.
The first fossil formation keychains had been designed as 3-part assemblies. However, in order to optimally portray 3 assemblages, the new keychain would need to be made in 4 parts rather than 3.
People say that keychain design isn't rocket science, and I suppose they've got a point, but while the pocket environment may not be quite so demanding as that of space, well, how would your average rocket do if it were jangling around in a closed space with a bunch of great big brass and steel objects? Well, the problem is twofold. First, there's pewter spin casting, which, while it can preserve an astonishing amount of detail, when it comes to dimensional tolerances, it's less precise. And then there's the material. When it comes to deformability, I guess that pewter is probably closer to cheese than it is to steel or aluminum.